Hello everyone, Detective Frost here. Welcome back to the True Crime series, The Cold Files. File number 04A, the woman found inside the water tank. For weeks, guests at the Cecil Hotel complained that something was wrong with the water. It was downtown Los Angeles, February 2013. An old hotel stood among busy streets, neon signs, and passing traffic. The kind of place where hundreds of people could move through the same lobby without ever really noticing one another. But somewhere inside that building, a young woman's ordinary trip had become a case no one could easily explain. Her name was Elisa Lam, also known as Lam Ho Yi. She was 21 years old, a Canadian student from Vancouver with a Hong Kong background, traveling alone through California. She liked writing, observing the world around her, and documenting pieces of her life online. She was not just a name attached to a strange case. She was a daughter, a student, a young person, trying to see more of the world, with a family waiting to hear from her. At first, there was nothing about the situation that seemed unusual. Elisa had been moving through California, visiting cities, continuing a trip that should have ended in another ordinary checkout. She checked into the Cecil Hotel, then partly operating as Stay on Main, and on January 31st, she was supposed to leave Los Angeles and continue her journey. But that day, the ordinary rhythm of her trip broke completely. When Elisa did not check out as expected, and her family could no longer reach her, the case began as a missing person investigation. Days passed. Then the Los Angeles Police Department released surveillance footage from inside an elevator. In it, Elisa pressed buttons, stepped in and out, looked into an empty hallway, and moved in a way that seemed difficult to understand without knowing what had happened before or afterward. That video became the center of the mystery. Nearly 3 weeks later, Elisa was found in a place few people had thought to look, above the hotel, on the roof. The question sounded simple. The answer never was. How did Elisa Lam go from that elevator to the roof of the Cecil Hotel? For her family, that day should have been ordinary. Elisa had been keeping in touch during her travels, and those regular calls mattered. They were small signs of safety, small reminders that she was still moving through her journey as planned. So when the call did not come, the silence was not easy to dismiss. Her parents contacted authorities, and as the days passed without answers, they traveled to Los Angeles themselves. They were not watching a mystery from a distance. They were parents searching for their daughter in a city that suddenly felt too large and too indifferent. Investigators began looking through the hotel. Elisa's room was checked. Accessible areas of the building were searched. According to reports, police also used search dogs, but the first search did not reveal where she was. Nothing immediately pointed to a clear explanation. There was no simple note, no obvious sign that she had left to start a new life, and no discovery that could explain why her family had suddenly lost contact. At that stage, the case still had the shape of something familiar. A young traveler missing from a hotel, a family worried, police trying to reconstruct her final movements. Then the elevator video changed the way everyone looked at it. On February 13th, the Los Angeles Police Department released footage from inside one of the hotel elevators, hoping someone might recognize something important. The video showed Elisa alone. She enters the elevator and presses several buttons. She waits, but the doors do not close. She steps out, then back in. She looks into the hallway. At moments, she appears to move her hands in a way that viewers found difficult to interpret. The footage did not show an attack. It did not show another person. It did not show Elisa being forced anywhere. But it showed just enough uncertainty for strangers online to begin filling in the blanks. Almost immediately, the video became the center of the case. People replayed the same few minutes again and again, searching for a figure in the hallway, a hidden reflection, or a reason the elevator door stayed open. Some believed she was hiding from someone. Others wondered whether the video had been altered. Some pulled the case towards supernatural explanations, partly because of the Cecil Hotel's dark reputation. But none of those theories had confirmed evidence behind them. What is known is simpler, and in some ways more troubling. Elisa was alone in that footage, behaving in a way that was difficult to understand without knowing what had happened before or what would happen after. The video did not solve the case. It made the unknown feel visible. And once millions of people began watching the same few minutes, Elisa's final known moments became less like evidence and more like a puzzle. But while the internet was replaying the elevator, the real answer was waiting somewhere else in the building. The search continued, but the elevator footage did not point investigators directly to Elisa's location. It showed a moment, but it did not show a destination. The hotel remained open. Guests continued staying there, and then complaints began to come in. Not about a strange figure, not about a sound in the hallway, but about the water. Some guests reported problems with water pressure and water quality. It was a practical complaint, the kind of issue a hotel maintenance worker would normally handle without much attention. But in this case, that ordinary complaint became the turning point. On February 19, 2013, a maintenance worker went to inspect the water tanks on the roof of the hotel. There, inside one of the tanks, workers found Elisa. The discovery answered one question immediately. Elisa had never truly left the building in the way many people imagined, but it also raised new questions that were harder to settle emotionally. How had she reached the roof? How had she gotten into the tank? Why had the earlier search not found her? And how did the strange elevator footage connect to the final location? The official investigation moved toward a conclusion that was quieter than many of the theories online, but no less sad. The final finding determined Elisa's death to be an accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder noted as a significant contributing factor. It explained the official cause of death, not every step that led there. That conclusion matters. It means the case was not officially treated as a confirmed homicide. There was no criminal trial, no conviction, and no proven attacker hidden inside the elevator video. Reports surrounding the case have also emphasized that investigators did not find clear evidence of a violent crime, in the way many online theories suggested. But official conclusions do not always quiet public imagination. For many people, the details still felt difficult to reconcile. A young woman alone in an elevator, doors refusing to close, a rooftop few guests would ever think about, and a water tank at the center of the case. The result was that Elisa's life was slowly reduced, in public memory, to a few minutes of surveillance footage. Millions of strangers studied her movements, paused her gestures, and turned a painful family tragedy into one of the most discussed online mysteries of the 2010s. That is one of the most uncomfortable parts of this story. Because Elisa Lam was not just the girl in the elevator video. She was a daughter, a student, a young woman who wrote about her thoughts, her hopes, her struggles, and her search for meaning. Her family lost someone real, while the world argued over a few frames of footage. What makes Elisa Lam's story so difficult to forget is the distance between an official conclusion and the emotional uncertainty left behind by everything no camera recorded. The elevator video gave the world something to replay. The water tank gave investigators an answer. But between those two places, there are still moments that cannot be fully reconstructed. That gap became the space where speculation grew, some careful, some careless, and some so detached from Elisa herself that it turned a young woman's death into a puzzle instead of a loss. The hardest part of this case is remembering that mystery should not erase humanity. Elisa was not a myth, not a ghost story, and not just a figure moving strangely on a screen. She was a young woman far from home, in a vulnerable moment, with a family who deserved answers and privacy. Sometimes the most haunting cases are not the ones without conclusions, but the ones where the conclusion still leaves behind silence. Elisa Lam's case leaves behind silence because the final moments could never be fully seen. But sometimes, the most unsettling cases begin with something even harder to explain. A person leaving safety by choice, or at least appearing to. In Shelby, North Carolina, on a rainy Valentine's Day morning, a 9-year-old girl vanished before sunrise. And the first question was not where she went, but why she left at all. File number 04B, the road where Asha Degree vanished. Just before dawn on Valentine's Day, a driver on Highway 18 saw something that made no sense. It was February 14, 2000, in Shelby, North Carolina. The road was dark, the weather was bad, and most families were still asleep inside their homes. But along the edge of the highway, moving through the rain and the early morning darkness, was a little girl walking alone. She was only 9 years old. Her name was Asha Degree. She lived in Shelby with her parents, Harold and Akila Degree, and her older brother, O'Brien. To the people who loved her, Asha was not a mystery. She was a daughter, a sister, a school child with routines, belongings, homework, clothes, and a backpack that should have stayed inside the house that night. At first, there was nothing about the evening before that seemed to announce what was coming. Her family's night appeared ordinary. According to reports, Asha was last seen asleep in her room in the early morning hours. Her parents believed she was safe at home, in the place a child is supposed to be safest. But sometime after that, Asha left. Around 4 a.m., more than one driver reported seeing a young girl believed to be Asha walking along Highway 18. One of them turned back, possibly to check on her. But when the vehicle came near, the girl ran off the road and into the trees. After that, she disappeared from sight. What made this case so unsettling was not just that Asha vanished. It was the question that came before everything else. Why would a 9-year-old girl leave her home in the middle of the night, in the rain, and walk alone down a dark highway? In the early morning hours of February 14, 2000, the last confirmed moment inside Asha Degree's home was quiet. According to the FBI, her family last saw her asleep in her bedroom around 2:30 a.m. About an hour and a half later, drivers reported seeing a child matching Asha's description, walking along North Carolina Highway 18 in Shelby. By 6:30 that morning, her parents had reported her missing. That was the first part investigators had to understand. Asha had not simply disappeared from her bedroom with no trace. She had been seen outside, away from home, in the dark, walking beside a highway in bad weather. Investigators were no longer looking only at a child missing from her bedroom. They were looking at a child seen walking into the night. The sighting changed the shape of the case immediately. If the drivers were correct, then Asha had left the house sometime after her family last saw her sleeping. Her backpack was gone too, which suggested she may have carried belongings with her. But that only made the question harder. Why would a 9-year-old girl leave home at that hour, in those conditions, without telling anyone? At first, the search focused on what seemed possible in the moment. Family members, neighbors, local authorities, and later state and federal investigators searched the area around the Degree home, the stretch of Highway 18 where Asha had reportedly been seen, and the wooded area near the road. According to reports, one driver had turned around after seeing the girl, trying to check on her. But when the vehicle came near, she ran from the roadside into the trees. That image became one of the most difficult parts of the story to understand. Asha was not seen being pulled into the woods in front of a witness. She was seen leaving the road, disappearing into the darkness by herself. And because of that, the case carried two mysteries from the beginning. One was why she left home. The other was what happened after she left the road. For a long time, Highway 18 remained the center of those questions. It was the road where she was last seen. It was the road investigators kept returning to. And more than a year later, it became important again. In August 2001, Asha's book bag was discovered buried along Highway 18 in Burke County, far from where she had last been reported seen. The FBI has said the bag was found more than a year after her disappearance, buried along that same highway. That discovery changed the emotional weight of the case. A child can walk away from a house. A child can become lost. A child can make a decision that adults may never fully understand. But a buried backpack found far from home suggests something else may have entered the story. The bag did not answer why Asha left. It made the question of what happened afterward much heavier. Years later, investigators released information about items found inside the book bag. The FBI said it contained a New Kids on the Block concert t-shirt and a copy of McElligot's Pool by Dr. Seuss. Neither item was believed to have belonged to Asha, though the book came from the library at her school. Those objects were small, ordinary things. A shirt, a children's book. But inside a missing child's buried backpack, they became deeply important. Investigators wanted to know who had seen them, who had handled them, and why they were there. Highway 18 was no longer just the place where Asha had been seen walking. It had become the line connecting almost every unanswered question. Then, in 2016, another possible clue became public. The FBI and the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office asked for information about a dark green vehicle. Investigators said someone matching Asha's description may have been seen getting into a distinctive car along Highway 18. The vehicle was described as an early 1970s Lincoln Mark IV, or possibly a Ford Thunderbird, dark green, with rust around the wheel wells. Again, the case shifted. If the sighting was accurate, the story was no longer only about a girl leaving home. It was about who might have crossed her path after she was alone on the road. For years, the public knew the case mostly through those fragments: the road, the backpack, the strange items, the green car. But in 2024 and 2025, new search warrant documents brought the investigation back into public view. According to those search warrant documents, investigators were looking at the possibility that Asha had been the victim of a homicide and that her body had been concealed. They also described DNA evidence connected to items in the case. But those details remain part of an investigation. They are not a conviction, and they do not establish in court what happened to Asha after she left Highway 18. Authorities searched properties connected to the Dedmon family. A green 1964 AMC Rambler was also seized during the 2024 searches, and investigators noted that it had features they considered similar to the type of green vehicle they had been seeking. WBTV later reported that, as of February 2026, no arrests had been made, and no charges had been filed in connection with Asha's disappearance. The Dedmon family has denied involvement, so the case now remains in a painful space between movement and resolution. There are facts that are known. Asha left her home. She was reportedly seen on Highway 18. Her backpack vanished with her and was later found buried far away. Investigators searched for a green car. Recent warrants suggest a more serious direction in the investigation, but the most important answers remain missing. No one has publicly established exactly why Asha left her house that night. No one has confirmed who may have crossed her path after she ran into the trees. And as of the latest public updates, no one has been convicted for what happened to her. For Asha's family, Valentine's Day has never returned to being an ordinary date. Each year marks another year without the final answer they have waited for since that morning in 2000. For investigators, this is a cold case with new movement. For Asha's family, it has always been one thing: the search for their daughter. Asha Degree's case is haunting because it begins with a decision no one has ever been able to explain. Before the backpack, before the green car, before the search warrants and the renewed attention, there was one image: a 9-year-old girl leaving a safe room, stepping into a storm, and walking toward a road in the dark. Over time, the evidence changed the way investigators looked at the case. The buried backpack made it harder to see this as only a child leaving home. The unfamiliar items inside it, the possible vehicle sighting, and the later investigative documents all suggested that someone else may have entered the story after Asha reached Highway 18. But suspicion is not the same as proof, and movement in a case is not the same as closure. That is what makes the silence around Asha so painful. The case has details, timelines, and theories, but it still does not have the answer her family has waited for since Valentine's Day morning in 2000. The road where Asha Degree vanished was never just a road. It became the line between what her family knew and everything they still do not know. Asha Degree's story leaves us with a road, a storm, and a question that has outlasted every lead. But in some cases, the warning signs are not found after someone disappears. They appear before anyone is gone. Years earlier, on an isolated farm in Bavaria, a family began noticing footprints, sounds, and missing things around their home. The question was not why someone left, but whether someone had already come in. File number 04C, the farm where 6 people were murdered. For days after the murders, the farm did not look abandoned. In the first days of April 1922, an isolated farm in Bavaria remained strangely active from the outside. The animals had been fed, food in the house appeared to have been touched, the fireplace had been used. And yet, the people who lived at Hinterkaifeck had stopped appearing in the places where neighbors expected to see them. No one went out to work the fields. The children did not come to school. The family did not show up at church. At first, these absences may have seemed like separate details, small signs that could be explained away. But together, they formed a picture that was difficult to ignore. Hinterkaifeck was not a house in the middle of a busy town. It was a remote farm near the villages of Weidhofen and Grobern, roughly 70 kilometers from Munich, surrounded by fields, woodland, and long stretches of quiet. The people living there were Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, Victoria's 2 children, young Cecilia and Joseph, and a new maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had only just arrived to begin work. Before the final silence, there had already been strange signs around the farm. Andreas had reportedly spoken of footprints in the snow leading from the forest toward the property, with no clear trail leading back out. There were stories of noises from the attic, a broken lock, and a missing key. At the time, each detail may have felt unsettling but incomplete. Later, they would seem like warnings, because the question at Hinterkaifeck was not only what happened to the family, it was whether someone had been close to them before anyone understood the danger. According to later accounts, Andreas Gruber told a neighbor about footprints in the snow. They seemed to lead from the forest toward the farm, but he could not find a clear set of footprints leading away. Footprints can show where someone came from, but at Hinterkaifeck, the missing trail asked a darker question. Where did that person go? There were other details too. The family reportedly heard noises from the attic. A key was said to be missing. A lock had signs of damage. Taken one by one, these things could perhaps be explained. A rural farm had animals, weather, old wood, tools, and ordinary reasons for strange sounds. But when placed together, the details began to suggest something more unsettling, as if someone had been close to the family before anyone understood the danger. Andreas did not report these signs to the police before the killings. Maybe he did not think they were enough. Maybe he believed he could handle the matter himself. Or maybe, like many people when faced with something strange but incomplete, he tried to fit it into the world he already knew. That is one of the reasons Hinterkaifeck remains so disturbing. The warning signs were not invisible. They were simply not understood in time. On March 31st, 1922, Maria Baumgartner arrived at the farm to begin work as the family's new maid. It should have been the start of a normal position in a remote household. Chores, meals, animals, routines. Instead, Maria walked into Hinterkaifeck on the very day the farm's history would change forever. That night, or in the early hours of April 1st, all 6 people at the farm were killed. The victims were Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Victoria Gabriel, Victoria's 2 children, young Cecilia and Joseph, and Maria Baumgartner. According to common accounts of the case, 4 members of the family were likely drawn into the barn or stable area first, while 2 others were later found inside the living quarters. The killer appears to have used a farm tool, and the attack seemed deliberate rather than accidental. The killings were already difficult to process, but what happened after them may be the detail that made Hinterkaifeck unforgettable, because the killer did not appear to vanish immediately. For several days after the killings, the farm still seemed to show signs of life. The animals appeared to have been cared for. Food may have been eaten. The fireplace had been used. None of this proves every movement of the killer, but it created one of the case's most unsettling possibilities. Whoever was responsible may not have left immediately, and that created the question at the center of the case. If the killer had already done what they came to do, why did they not leave? Between April 1st and April 4th, the absence of the family became harder to ignore. The children did not appear at school. The family did not attend church. People who came near the property received no answer. In a rural community where routines were noticed and absences carried meaning, the silence around Hinterkaifeck slowly became impossible to explain away. On April 4th, neighbors went to check the farm. Among them was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a local man who would later become one of the most discussed figures in the case. What they found inside confirmed that the silence had been hiding something far worse than illness or absence. The authorities were called, and investigators from Munich, led by Inspector Georg Reingruber, began looking into the murders. But by then, the case had already been damaged in a way that could never be fully repaired. The scene had not been preserved by modern standards. Neighbors and others had entered the property before investigators could properly control it. Objects may have been moved. Footprints, fingerprints, and traces that might have mattered were disturbed or lost. This does not mean the case failed only because of mistakes at the scene. But it does mean investigators were trying to read a story after several of its most important lines had already been blurred. At first, robbery was considered as a possible motive, but that explanation had one problem. Money and valuables were reportedly still inside the house. If the killer had come for wealth, the scene did not clearly support that idea. The presence of valuables weakened the theory that this was a simple robbery gone wrong. Instead, investigators had to consider something more personal, more complicated, or more difficult to define. A farm tool later believed by some accounts to be connected to the murders was found. with some accounts saying it was discovered during or around the demolition of the farm. Like so much in the Hinterkaifeck case, the detail has to be handled carefully, because the age of the investigation and the condition of early records leave room for uncertainty. But the broader point remained. The killer had used something connected to the farm itself, something ordinary turned into evidence. Over the years, several people were considered or discussed as possible suspects, including Lorenz Schlittenbauer, Carl Gabriel, former workers, passing criminals, the Gump brothers, and people who may have had conflicts with the family. Schlittenbauer drew suspicion because he was a neighbor, had known the family, had a past connection to Victoria Gabriel, and was among the people who discovered the bodies. Another theory involved Carl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, who was believed to have died during World War I. Some speculated that he had survived and returned, but that theory never gained solid proof. Each path ended in the same place: suspicion, rumor, and not enough evidence for a conviction. What makes Hinterkaifeck so unsettling is that the strongest feeling in the case comes not from one answer, but from the pattern of unanswered details. Footprints leading in, but not clearly out. Noises in the attic. A missing key, a broken lock. A new maid arriving on the last day. A whole family gone silent. And then, after the murders, the strange suggestion that someone may have remained at the farm long enough to eat, warm the house, and care for the animals. The farm was demolished less than a year after the murders. Physically, Hinterkaifeck disappeared from the landscape, but removing the buildings did not remove the questions. If anything, it made the case feel even more unreachable, because the place that might have held the answers was gone. The official file was closed in 1955, though later interviews and discussions continued for decades. A later review reportedly examined the case using a more modern investigative perspective and highlighted how difficult the original investigation had been, especially because key evidence had not been preserved in the way it would be today. But even a modern review could not produce a public, legally confirmed answer. No one was ever convicted. For the surviving relatives, neighbors, and the wider region, Hinterkaifeck became more than a murder case. It became a symbol of rural isolation, the fear that danger can sit close to a home for days, perhaps even inside it, while the rest of the world continues unaware. What is known is clear enough to be tragic. 6 people were killed at Hinterkaifeck at the end of March 1922. Their bodies were found on April 4th. The killer was never officially identified. There were signs before the murders that someone may have approached or disturbed the farm. And there were signs afterward that the property may have been used after the family was already dead. But the central questions remain unanswered. Who was the killer? Was it a stranger, a neighbor, a former worker, or someone who knew the family's routines? Had someone hidden in or around the farm before the murders? And if the killer stayed afterward, what reason could they have had to remain in a place like that? By the time the investigation began to take shape, the tragedy had already taken 6 lives, and the scene had already lost part of its ability to speak. Hinterkaifeck was demolished, but the questions around it were never cleared away. What makes Hinterkaifeck so difficult to forget is not only the number of lives lost, but the feeling that the danger may have been inside the rhythm of the farm before anyone understood it. The footprints, the noises, the missing key, the broken lock. Each detail could be dismissed on its own. Together, they became a warning that was only fully understood after it was too late. The case also shows how fragile truth can become when the first hours are lost. By the time investigators began building a clearer picture, the scene had been entered, touched, and changed. The farm may have held answers in its floors, doors, tools, and tracks, but many of those answers disappeared before they could be properly read. Hinterkaifeck is remembered not as a ghost story, but as a real tragedy left without a confirmed name behind it. There were suspects, rumors, and theories, but never enough proof to close the distance between suspicion and truth. The farm is gone now, but Hinterkaifeck remains, not as a building, but as a question. And the most difficult question is still the simplest one. After the killings, why did the murderer stay? Across all 3 cases, the most disturbing part is not only what happened, it is how ordinary everything looked before it did. A hotel hallway, a quiet family home, a remote farm with animals to feed and routines to follow. Each story began with something small, a strange recording, a child on a road, footprints in the snow, and each small detail later became impossible to forget. What connects these cases is not one answer, but the way uncertainty changes everything. Sometimes the truth is delayed by missing context. Sometimes it is damaged by speculation. Sometimes it is lost in the first hours, before anyone understands that a detail matters. And even when there is an official conclusion or a renewed investigation, closure is not always the same as knowing every step. Maybe that is why these stories stay with us. They remind us that danger does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides in routine, in silence, and in the details people are too busy or too late to notice. These are the cases that should not have ended this way. Not because every mystery demands a darker answer, but because every person at the center of these stories deserved more than uncertainty. If you want more stories like this, told with care and respect, consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching.
This file may be closed, but the truth is always out there. What do you think really happened? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the next case. I'm Detective Frost, and this is the Cold Files.